We have Eric Delansky from Brock University, and he is going to come and he is going to talk to us about pricing and the theory of pricing and how it could be applied in other industries and how that might work actually in housing. And I think this is probably the first time, like I said, that we've actually had kind of more a scientific kind of understanding of how we should think about pricing of new homes in the marketplace. We are then going to have Dina Vidal from the John Burns organization come in, and she's going to talk about what features are kind of drawing buyers into the new home experience and driving that price differential. We're going to have Paul Hansen come from Epcon Community, who, as you know, is predominantly kind of a 55-plus builder where they've done a lot of clinicking of the boomer generation and what they're looking for and how it's changed their offering. And then finally, we're going to have Melissa Moorman from BDX come and talk about messaging and how we need to change our messaging in the marketplace. So I'd love to have all of those speakers come up here and take your seats up at the podium. And we are going to start off with a presentation by Eric Delansky from Brock University. Eric, welcome. Going to give you the little clicker there.
Okay.
Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
Like I said, pricing in our industry has sometimes I think is a challenge. I've watched builders say, wow, our sales are high. Let's just increase all of our products by $10,000. Every lot, every home, every plan, everything. We price options many times through purchasing by simply putting a 1.3%, 1.3x of whatever it costs us on every single option. So we have a 30% margin on everything, even though some options we probably could charge 300% of what it actually costs us for. So figuring out some nuance there of how we could harvest more profitability and price more effectively is critical to everybody in the audience. So take it away, Eric.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Delansky. I'm a marketing professor at Brock University in the Niagara region in Canada. I teach general marketing, but I also teach a course specifically in pricing. And what I'm going to talk to you today about is some of that content that I talk to my students about how to price. And then in my conversations with Tim, some elements of that may be more interesting and relevant for you. So essentially, there are three ways to price. We can price based on cost, which from my understanding, conversations with John, conversations with Tim, this is the dominant way that prices are set in this industry. And when I say based on cost, we're talking about cost plus margin. It's very easy to do. You just take what it costs you to acquire, you add the desired margin on top. It's extremely common. You look at a lot of packaged goods companies, many industries, distribution, logistics, all of those tend to use cost-based pricing. But it's also deeply flawed. And the reason why it's deeply flawed is there's no real connection to value. The value that the customer places on the product that you're selling is not factored into the equation beyond the general tenuous idea that maybe it's based on cost partially. The second way to price is based on what the competition charges. And the example I give to my students on that, that's sort of like copying your exam off the student next to you. You're assuming they know more than you do. You're assuming they've studied, they've done things right. So if you're basing only on what the competition charges, it is also flawed. It's common, it's also easy to do, but you're taking it for granted that they've set their prices based on a particular system, which they may not have. The best way to do things is pricing based on value. Definitely more challenging. You have to understand the drivers of value for your customers. You have to understand what your customers want and how much they're willing to pay for it. It's not that commonly done, but big companies do it. They tend to do it for their bigger purchases, more impactful purchases where the customer is more involved in a extended decision-making process, kind of like buying a home, and it tends to be more profitable as well. What are you trying to achieve through pricing? You're trying to reach that point that you see on the slide. Now, this is just conceptual. You will never actually know if you are charging the ideal price where you are most profitable. The reason for that is that point changes over time based on what you do, based on what your competitors do, and generally speaking, you may increase your prices a little bit, you're a little bit more profitable, you think you're getting closer to that peak, or the opposite, you increase your prices, your profit goes down a little bit, so maybe I should pull back. But it's useful as a concept. This is your goal, because if you keep looking at what most companies do, and there's research on this that in fact this is what most companies do, the only thing we can do with price is lower it to become more competitive. Well, you keep driving down the downslope of that curve, and you're never actually moving to that ideal price point. So it tends to be a persistent myth that prices should be based on cost. This is what, as consumers, we view prices should be based on. This is how we think about prices in general, that they're fair this way, that they're defensible. If our customer asks me why I'm priced this way, well, our costs are this, or our costs went up, and so our price went up. And cost does provide important information, as you're going to see on an upcoming slide. But cost also has flaws. You won't reach that peak I was talking about, and as I said, it is disconnected from value. So based on a conversation with Tim, an example that came to mind is outlets in a home. Okay? Now, this actually came up in my home. I made these slides last week, but it came up in my home 2 days ago because my wife wanted to plug something in our house, and there was no outlet nearby. And she said, can we call the electrician and bring and put a new outlet? And I said, there's an outlet like around the corner 4 feet away. Why are we going to pay a couple $100s for an electrician to visit, install an outlet, that kind of stuff? When you're building a new home, if you have a customer that wants a lot of outlets, my understanding is this is extremely inexpensive to do. But it adds a lot of value. It adds value in a way such as install an outlet where you can plug in a USB instead of a regular 3-prong plug, which I'm sure you're already doing. But that step alone adds value. You're telling the customer, we're giving you what you want. And the value that you're providing far exceeds the cost of the installation of that one outlet. So you can probably charge a lot more, decouple the cost from the value, and in the process become more profitable. The second pricing myth is this idea that a higher price indicates higher quality. This is only a partial myth because it actually does hold as long as the customer is not particularly well informed or knowledgeable about the product. Okay? So for example, if I need to go to a store, buy a bottle of wine for a dinner party, if I know nothing about wine, I'm probably going to say, okay, well, if it's a more expensive wine, it's probably a better wine. I feel safer bringing this to my friend's home as a gift because I'm pretty sure this is going to be a decent wine. But if I know a lot about wine, then I'm not looking to price to tell me how good the wine it is. I'll know what I'm doing. As customers become more knowledgeable about housing because of all of this information that's online, because of all of these things that customers can do before they come see your company, that idea that if we charge more, people will think it's better starts to disintegrate a little bit. So your range of prices is what you see on the slide there. And I said before, cost provides useful information. Absolutely, it provides the floor. You're not going to charge lower than your cost. But if you can also know the perceived value of your product, that forms a ceiling. Now you have an acceptable range of prices. Okay, so you're not necessarily pricing at the value that you have determined. You're pricing somewhere within this range. And finding that spot, finding that ceiling is effortful. I'm going to talk about it in a second. But like most things, what you put into a process is going to be what you get out of it. If you're just going to say, we're going to price based around that bottom line and just go up from it a little bit, you're not going to be harvesting as much value and as much revenue as you can. There are also benefits I'll go into by going through this process beyond just what price you set, because you're going to learn a lot more about what your customers value, how to communicate that value to your customers, and how to justify the prices that you set. The way to do this is what's called the VTC pricing process, and there's 4 steps involved. I'm not going to walk through in detail these steps. This isn't that kind of session where it's very technical. I am going to talk a little bit more on it, about it in some later sessions in this conference. But essentially what you're doing is you start with a reference point. You find the things that are different between you and the reference value. So if you're looking at a used home as a reference point, how is your new home different from a used home in your trading area? And then you go and you value each of these differences, plus and minus. The used home is in a more desirable area where there's an established school, whereas there's more unknowns in the new community you're building. Well, that would be a negative. The new home comes with a warranty and everything is brand new. That's a positive. So you go through and you value each of these. Some are objective values. Some are subjective values that require a bit more research into what customers want. And then you sum all of that and you have this idea of value. From there you set a price. This last step of setting the price is tricky because it's anywhere within that whole range that I showed. You have to take into account competition. You have to take into account the fact that there are going to be different customer segments. You have to take into account your goals. So are you in a situation where you've invested heavily in a particular community and you're just trying to sell the remaining units? That will affect the price you set. Whereas if you're trying to get maximum value for each and every unit, that will also change the price that you set. You also have to take into account things like trends, whether it's interest rates or any of the other things that have been discussed today and will continue to be discussed. When we look at the value between new and used homes, it's about the drivers of that value. So things like, this is my house, no one else has lived there. It's mine in the sense that I have chosen everything that goes in there. I'm not a housing person. When John contacted me to be part of this, he asked me, what's my experience with housing? I said, well, I own a house, but I'm not in this industry, but I do know about price. So if my examples don't hit 100%, that's fine. You can probably still get the idea. This is modern and up to date. There's no retrofitting. There's no renovation needed. I've looked at houses. We almost moved about 10 years ago, and one of the biggest things holding us back buying this used home, which was in the location we wanted, it was on a very large property, it had almost everything we wanted, but we would have had to dump about 6 figures into this house to bring it to where we wanted it to be for the interior. For a new home, don't have to worry about that. It's all part of the price. The idea of the warranty and security, and as was discussed in the previous session, this peace of mind or lack of anxiety all holds value. So then why are new homes not dominant? Well, part of it is perceptions. I know, speaking to friends of mine who have bought new homes, there's this idea, I have to go visit all the time to make sure they're doing things right, to make sure that it's being cleaned before they put the flooring down, to make sure that, everything is exactly the way they told me. So there are some perception issues. There may be location issues. And are you communicating the value of what it is you're selling appropriately? So let's say, I got this number from Tim, the idea that new homes are about 10.5% more expensive than used homes. That's what you told me, right?
Depends on the market.
Okay, let's use that as the number. Okay, if I have a used home at price X and a new home at price X plus 10.5%, what I'm selling there is equivalent value for money. Okay, it's not the same dollar amount, but what I'm getting for each dollar I'm spending is equivalent. You don't want this situation. What this is a difficult decision for customers to make. Because now they don't know, should I spend X on the used home or X plus 10.5% on the new home? You want to make it an easy decision for them. One way to do that is bring that 10.5% down a little bit, but I'm not here to tell you to lower price. Another way to do it is to increase those perceptions of value. Sell the value more, convince them that they're getting more value for money. I told you earlier there are benefits to this beyond pricing. You'll learn what has value. So what products and features should we be including in our home? If you understand what drives value, that question can begin to be answered. What are the selling points? Maybe there are things that drive value that customers really don't care that much about. When you talk to them about it, they just expect it to be there. Well, you're not going to use those as your selling points. Maybe you'll use more outlets in your home or fancier outlets or a different kind of breaker panel or whatever else as the driver of value. How do we communicate it? What do customers respond to? And you have to remember, it goes beyond the physical product or the benefits and features that you have in the home. Can you guarantee me that this home is going to be ready on the date that you told me it was? That has value. Because if I know, you know what, they're going to start paying me every day that they're late, great. Now I don't have that anxiety. That's worth something. It drives you as the builder to make sure you have it done on time. But if you know you can, then build that in. Okay, brand. It's not all the utility. It's not all that has this kind of air filter in the home. It could just be it has an air filter in the home. Or this house is COVID-proof, or whatever else you want to sell it to make sure you're driving the value. Not literally COVID-proof. That would be a house that no one goes in and out of. In competing with used homes, you have to remember, customers are getting everything they want. This is extremely valuable to them. Don't underestimate that. And you can charge for it, okay? charge more for a particular color or paint finish, as I'm going to talk about in a minute. It's going to be cheaper than them adding it to a new home. The home I'm living in now, before we moved in, we did what everyone else did. We got a handyman, we got a painter, we got them to change everything, we got the rugs fixed, all of that stuff, when that could have been built into what you were selling in the first place had you convinced me to buy a new home instead, not you literally. Also look at where you're weaker. You're going to be probably building a new community. If someone wants to be near family or friends in an existing community, that's somewhere you're weaker. You're going to have to mitigate that. You're going to have to be able to explain the value of not living in the community, but you get this instead. There you go. There's lots of opportunities when we talk about features and benefits. All right, so I was looking at the previous presentation and they showed you could put in different kinds of tile or a pocket door or whatever else. That all has value, yes, but it also has the opportunity to bundle some of these features together and capture more value. You already have the customer interested. You already have them thinking, yes, I probably want this. Now you look at how can I get even more money out of them. So I gave the example of paint. You're going to have to paint the walls anyway. It's of no cost difference to you if the paint is green versus eggshell white. Okay, but it may be extremely valuable to the customer. This may be something that they'd be willing to pay thousands of dollars for, to be able to choose their color or have a particular effect done or whatever that is of low or no cost to you. Car companies know this. That's why if I want to buy a car with metallic red paint instead of the standard gray, they're going to charge me a few $100s for it. Even though it's going through the same factory, it's no cost difference to them to put the metallic red on.
Eric will also make you buy the LED headlights in the collision avoidance system.
That's what I'm going to talk about, yeah.
Well.
Yes. So when we talk about bundling, look at automotive. I bought a minivan a few years back, and we wanted the built-in DVD, it was a few years back, the built-in DVDs in the headrests for the kids. Okay, in order to get that, I had to buy a moonroof package. I didn't particularly want the moonroof. Why did they do that? Is it just to squeeze more dollars out of me? Because a lot of the time, people will do, what I did, which is forget the moonroof, I'm going to do this aftermarket. I can spend the same on the DVD package without having to pay the moonroof. It has very little to do with the cost of the item. It has very little to do with any research that shows people who want a DVD also want a moonroof. It's not about that at all. The example I'll give you is the Google Chromecast. Okay? You buy a Chromecast for a regular HD TV. In Canada, it's like $35 where I live. If you buy it for a 4K TV, it's $70. It is essentially the same device. The cost to Google and their manufacturers is barely different. The reason why they charge twice as much for the 4K is because they know people who are willing to spend on a 4K TV are willing to spend more on the Chromecast. It's about who the customer is. So if you can bundle things together for people who value different features, you can make more money. Here's an example for bundling. So let's say we're selling two products. Obviously, these numbers are relatively low for things going into a home, but it's just an example. So you have segment A, they value product one at $50 and product two at $130. Segment B values product one more at $75, but less at $100. So you could use pricing option one, which is let's price everything low and sell as many of them as we can. Well, you're leaving money on the table. You have customers who are willing to pay more for this product. Okay, so let's price everything high. Now you're losing customers. You have people who might have bought at a different price. If you bundle the two products together and charge $175 for both together, now everyone is buying at almost as much as they were willing to pay. So you're looking for opportunities like this where you have different segments who want different things or value things differently. The only way you can know that is by doing the research into value. The last thing I'll talk to you about here, yes, this graph looks fancy and technical, but it isn't really that much. It's an illustration of a well-known concept you may have heard before, which is that losses loom larger than gains. Okay? The pain of paying $100 for something is greater than the joy of getting $100. What this means for you is if you are getting people to pay a lot of things individually, bundle them together. Because that initial pain of paying, that big swoop down right at the beginning, only happens once instead of over and over again. I'm sure you've seen this. People come in and they say, okay, now there's a charge for this, and now there's a charge for this, and now there's a charge for this. Well, each time they're like, that I don't have to pay that each time. When I went to university for my MBA, got there, you had to pay the tuition, which was a big amount. Okay, we had to buy our textbooks, big amount. Then I had to buy my business case books, which was a big amount. Each time it's like, oh my God, you're making me pay again and again and again. Whereas if they bundled it all together, I would have had to pay one time, and my pain of paying may not have been that much bigger than the tuition. What that also means is if you're giving any kind of a bonus, if you're giving anything positive, you want to separate them. So they get that initial joy each time they get something. You want to separate them out so that each time you say, oh, you get this too. Oh, here's a bonus for you. Oh, here's a free 3 visits or something. Whatever it might be, you get that bonus each and every time. Just to sum up, better pricing is based on value rather than cost and can be a source of advantage for you against other builders, against used homes. You want to look for those high value, low cost opportunities. You will know what those are better than I will. But in order to do that, you have to incorporate customer behavior, perceptions of value, and preferences, and keep your eye on the prize. It is about profit. It is about getting as much money out of the customer for each unit that you're selling that you can. So, I welcome your questions at the end.
We're going to hold questions once again. Write your questions
There's my contact
down.
information.
Make sure you have one for Eric here at the end, because I think this is a fascinating subject. I think the key here is what Eric's telling you is there's an opportunity to extract more profit dollars on every home if we really think about the home as a series of value decisions.
Yes.
And then if we can make them take better value, now propose better value decisions by packaging appropriately. So now the question is, what do people value?